Panel,
Yes.
can you briefly
Okay,
introduce?
I'm from Malaysia. I'm Malaysia, and I reside in India for a number of years, and I'm recently relocated back to Malaysia. And Arunachala is my think tank. Okay, my university is HELB University from Malaysia.
What's your
My specialization is on the geopolitical issues, and I also look into the organized crime and terrorism, right? And corporate criminal liability. All right, these are my research areas. Yeah.
Okay, then maybe probably you may have a deep study in ASEAN region issue, geopolitics.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
How is your Malaysian foreign policy at the moment?
See, you must remember Malaysia, especially when you want to look into ASEAN per se. See, ASEAN, they have their a concept which is known as a Zofan, Zofan, if I'm not mistaken. This concept is we want to make this region as a war-free zone, right? And we do want to align with one particular superpower or one particular bloc, right? And when you look back on the formation of ASEAN itself, they are, the founding members, they are quite concerned about this. They want to make this region is the war-free zone. When you look back on from the historical perspective, Vietnam, they had a war, with France, then later on they had a war with the US, then the liberation of Vietnam, you can see that, then unification of Vietnam, North and South, right? And of course, Malaysia being colonized by British, and Indonesia being colonized by Dutch, and these are the experience that we had, and I actively, what happened is the Southeast Asia become the one of the center point for the conflict during the World War II as well. So these are the experience been learned by the leaders of ASEAN, and particularly Malaysia is quite concerned about this. And what I can see, the direction taken by the current Prime Minister, Dr. Sri Anwar Ibrahim, you want to balance the both sides. You don't want to upset the US, and you also don't want to upset the China by taking a side. So this is a very young country, but and the approach being taken by him compared to Najib, which you have mentioned just now, where he went very much in favor of China. So we can see some of the repercussion of it. So, and that's the reason he tried to balance it. And he's in power is, I think, is about little more than 1 year, right? Still young, and we can, and his foreign policy, Malaysian foreign policy, been evolved, after some time, and during the Dr. Mahathir time, Tun Mahathir time, you can see that we are quite active. We have had a very clear kind of a foreign policy, but that been blurred by the subsequent prime ministers. And now what we can see that the current prime minister tried to re-establish to have a very clear kind of a foreign policy, right? But it is still in a process, developing stage.
I understand.
And that's the reason you can see that,
I understand many ASEAN countries, many like Burma, Laos, they are very much pro-China. They are close border with China too. And I mean, I'm not blaming they are pro-China or pro-American or whatever you said. Many ASEAN leaders' interest for neutral, whether they have capacity or not, that is another issue. And but exactly. Right now is the thing is, Philippines is also advocating for South China Sea issue, as well as Vietnam. Already they have problem. I mean, Brunei, Malaysia too. Indonesia is also becoming maritime problem with China. China claim now not -9, now -10 again. He's claiming is like so. in this atmosphere, your annual, his mood is, it seems Malaysia doesn't have maritime problem with China, or how did you see use Malaysian is completely solving the maritime dispute with China, and you don't have any problem?
No, the thing is, what you can see when you look back on the relationship with another country, we call it C2C, country to country. There are various factors are involved. So not only you have to look into from the security perspective, you have to look into from the other perspective as well. And when you look back on in terms of the trading, right? One of the biggest trading partners for Malaysia is China. So we cannot jeopardize on that part. And a lot of investment been put by China into Malaysia as well. So these are some of the key factors the Malaysia have to look into it before they want to, to resolve any securities issues with China. Unlike Vietnam and Philippines, where the encroachment of the Chinese Navy vessels, which is upsetting the countries, and they are making like a protest, right? Which is in my view, I say is the right thing to do. So if you are foreign vessels coming to your territory, then you have the right to make noise. But for Malaysia, the relationship with Malaysia and China is quite unique, and the first country, diplomatic protest, so for the first country, when you look back on the history, the relationship between the Malaysia and China, one of the first country recognized China as a legitimate country compared to Taiwan, and when you look back on the in the early establishment of the China, and the West recognized Taiwan as a real China, and the mainland China been disregarded. But Malaysia is one of the first country recognized the mainland China is a real China. So that is a unique relationship that China and Malaysia has. And that's the reason any leaders who come to power in Malaysia, they have to treat China a little different compared to the other member states in ASEAN.
Right. After Burma, including Malaysia, I guess they recognize mainland China, and Burmese introduced China to United Nations. Before, the mainland China was not yet United Nations member.
Exactly.
Taiwan is still the member of UN. So later only mainland China become UN member. And I mean, you said the Philippines should the right thing to protest and block Chinese intrusion in the dispute area. I mean, China is not just blocking, also they are shooting with water gun and something, it's become more and more a kind of disputable and more physical things are involving. So it's worrisome in South China Sea. So I mean, last time also they have similar thing with Vietnam, but I don't know, next time maybe Malaysia, Brunei, or Indonesia, who knows? So one by one, things it might happen. Last year I talked with one of Filipino scholar. We have a consensus and we agree there should be first ASEAN member discussion about South China Sea, because only ASEAN, we don't have discussed about South China Sea conflict. Only individually they are engaging with China and here and there. So there should be common consensus of only ASEAN member. Only after then, next is negotiate with China, something like that. So how do you think Malaysia will also concern about ASEAN only first discussion on the conflict before talking with China?
Okay, I believe, see, this is a regional problem, right? So these are regional issues. When you want to talk about the South China Sea, Vietnam, Thailand, right? And Cambodia, right? And Malaysia, Singapore, right? And Brunei, Indonesia. So these are the countries, and Philippines, of course, right? So you need to have a collective response, right? So rather than you are dealing the issue individually, like Vietnam and China, Philippines and China. So as what you have highlighted, it must be a collective action from ASEAN. Will be more effective to deal with China, collectively, rather than you are dealing individually, right? So, but the problem here is, the ASEAN member state, they should not think that the problem of Vietnam or the problem of Malaysia, the problem of Philippines is their problem. It's not ASEAN problem. They must have the collective kind of intention to try to resolve and put a strong kind of a stand to China, to tell to China, this is the issue, and we want to resolve this issue amicably for the benefit of the both parties, right? Without jeopardizing the sovereignty of the states members of ASEAN. And this is quite important. When you look back on, I just want to tell you, when you look back on the issue of Ukraine and Russia, this is a prolonged war between these two countries happening. I mean, this is still continuing with more than 2 years, right? The most affected country is Ukraine, and also the European Union, the Europe. But when you look back on the person behind it, who's become the instrumental for this conflict, is another country who are in a far away from Europe. So the impact of Ukraine and the Russia war is really great impact for the European countries, because they have energy issues now, and the Baltic Sea issues, the security over there. So these are the things that are happening there. So ASEAN should not come to that kind of a position, and that's the reason the ASEAN state members, they need to be very cautious, where they should not allow the non-ASEAN members, even though they can be regarded as a superpower or emerging superpower or whatever it is, or neighbors, they should not allow these countries, right? Directing ASEAN members how to deal with China. So the ASEAN state, ASEAN members, they themselves have to come up with a solution, how they're going to deal with China. And that's the reason I said Malaysia is quite unique, when they want to deal with China, their approach is very unique. And Malaysia having a very special place in the China, especially the ruling party, they have a very special place, because and Malaysia is very cautious about it. They don't want to jeopardize it, even though Malaysia have a very good, partnership, and understanding with the West, especially US. They try to balance the both sides of it, which I think is a very difficult to do, but they are managing until now.
I mean, it's time for recognition of ASEAN member country. They need a common voice within ASEAN first, as you mentioned, without China, without India, without Russia, without America, before we talk with them, we first talk within ASEAN member countries only. So, but nobody are doing that. So we should recognize it first. We need common voice first within ASEAN. After we have clear discussion, we should do approach with ASEAN. We approach to China, or we approach to India, or Russia or America. But we have not initiated, common voice, common platform. We have organization, but nobody initiated. Even during Malaysian chairmanship and last year Indonesia chairmanship, even Philippine chairmanship, nobody highlighting the idea. So I start asking the idea. So Philippine agree. We need to. The one of the scholar, he said we need first within ASEAN to talk within ASEAN only. So he said Philippine president is visiting each country among ASEAN. He start doing, and I guess now it's time for to talk within ASEAN to have a common voice.
Now, what they can do is like, so rather than you are dealing individually, right, on the certain issues. So that's the reason I mentioned the collective voice is very important, right? See, what we can do is, similar with what European unions are doing. So we can come up with such kind of a model here where we can have ASEAN Parliament, ASEAN legislators, the member of legislators, like the European member of Parliament, right? So we can have that, for each country. So we can have the ASEAN Parliament to come up with the right kind of a direction where the ASEAN members can adopt it across, right? And, the ASEAN, the leadership, right, which come from the various countries, can have a discussion with the countries outside ASEAN where we have an issue, and they can represent all the members of the country, right? So this kind of a mechanism, we need to think about it, because we already established ASEAN, right? Whether ASEAN is effective as a regional organization or not, that is another question, right? Of course, we have deal with the certain issues, but in terms of the relationship with the other nation outside the region, how are we going to deal with it? That is another question of it. So why not we can make the entire the ASEAN as one unit, as one voice, right? To deal with the Australia, for example, or to deal with China, for example, or to deal with India, for example, or even in US, for example. Why not we create or re-establish it as one unit, which I think will be more effective. And this need to be agreed, collectively agreed by all the countries, all the member states in ASEAN. There must be one collective voice.
Right. I mean, it's good idea. We should have parliament, but parliament is more related for democracy country. If undemocratic country may not much concern about parliament, But anyway, there is every country has government. We have government involvement, government involvement. Apart from government, we should have a non-government group, civil society group. So first thing, we should have think tank group to make idea and to brainstorming. So I'm asking many times all these ASEAN colleagues why we don't have an expertise in ASEAN meeting, not just track one, think tank should be track two. So we have many times ASEAN meeting, but there was not good idea or nobody input, nobody bring up idea, and nobody initiated that we are talking, those idea. So we need a good track one plus track two. They should let them all this ASEAN expertise together and develop idea and share knowledge and solve the problem. Cooperation. We need, widely open for expertise to involve in ASEAN meeting. First, think tank. Then, after think tank suggestion, the implementer, the government representative, all this head of government or minister, they will be implement. And then, as you said, parliament. So step by step we can do. But first, think tanks are not strong enough in ASEAN meeting, I guess. Nobody are.
They are not so. Sorry to interrupt you, John. For the think tank, and most of the think tank are being funded by government agency or government. So they are just replicate the voice of the government. That's the problem, right? You need to have a totally independent think tank who are brave enough to tell the actual things where the government can take into the consideration and come up with the policies which will benefit the nation as a whole. But unfortunately, right, across the board, most of the think tank being funded directly, indirectly by the government or government agency. So they cannot go and say something which is against the wishes of the government. Otherwise, their funding will be stopped. This is the problem, right? So the think tank, whereas in the West, when I look back on the why they look into the issue very differently and come up with so many strategies, so many approaches, because they are very much independent. Right. Of course, they got funding, but they will make sure that the funding is not come from the government. It comes from the individual or come from the different sources, right? So they are quite critical about the certain policies implemented by the government, and they're giving a constructive suggestion for the government to improve, right? Which benefiting the nation as a whole. But unfortunately, from this part of the world, things are worked very differently. You understand now? So the independence of the think tank need to be made sure, and it's quite important for me, When I have some experience, let me share with you. When I look back on some of the, think tank, they get they in their report itself, they are put it, they get the funding from the government or government agency, which is really shocking me. So how you will be unbiased with this kind of a funding, how you will be unbiased, right? So surely you will take some kind of a side, when you want to do some research or what, which will, in the long run, which will not benefit the country as a whole. You understand now?
The region.
See, the implementation, the establishment of the, establishment of the ASEAN is taken place long time ago. By now, we already need to have a proper kind of a structure, work as one unit. Why is stumbling? Why is there is no kind of initiative? Because this is a problem. Underground underground problem. That's what we have. That's the issue here.
So if we want ASEAN country, ASEAN region free flow of knowledge and better quality and strategy about a policy, we should not, restrict that or block think tank from ASEAN member country, from civil society, independent think tank, unless we let them include or invite them, the strategy, idea, policy cannot get a good quality one. Now most government funded are kind of, they are restricting, blocking, and they are not producing any significant, That's why I'm asking, we don't have any expertise or scholar among ASEAN countries. So, and people are just go to the meeting and go and come back and nothing. They have done nothing. So have you ever attended at the ASEAN meeting, track 1 or track 2, Pane?
See, I want to abstain from myself from, to directly connected to the government because I want to be totally independent of what I'm doing, you know. And that's the reason my think tank is a self-funding, you know. I don't want to get any funding from anyone because, you know, then only I can voice it out, the
And they
issues,
should
without any kind
also
of influence.
invite independent think tank, you know, ASEAN meeting
Exactly,
should be
exactly.
invited.
You know, they need to include, that's what the ASEAN secretary is supposed to do. Rather than you're calling same group of think tank, which been funded by the government, you need to go and look for the independent think tank. It can be big, it can be small, invite them in their meeting, brainstorming, and ask them on look at the issues, ask them to give opinion. These are the things they have to do. But they have like a very kind of a rigid kind of a system. They have to go through the government, and the government will recommend certain think tank which is in favor of them. This think tank come and tell the policy of the government, all sort of things. So you have to think out of the box. See, when you want to discuss about the geopolitical issue, or i.e. the international relation, you need to have people who can think outside the box, who can think differently. Then only things can be worked out for the benefit of that particular country or the organization. If everyone in the meeting going to come to say the same thing, what is the purpose you're having the meeting for? Because you already come up with the conclusion before you attend the meeting already. Before the meeting begins, you already have the conclusion, right? This is the direction. This is what I want from this meeting. But then why you are attending the meeting? Why you are wasting the public money, time? You understand? No?
Right.
This is a serious problem.
In ASEAN meeting, right? It's not improving.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why I used to say it's like for a cup of coffee meeting, nothing more than that. But they don't agree, many people. But they did not allow and to flow idea, free of idea and better idea strategy. If you are restrict, it cannot get a good quality,
Yeah.
They should invite all independent think tank and expertise. We can see a lot of podcasts and a lot of report. There are many quality from outside ASEAN meeting participants. ASEAN meeting government oriented think tank are doing almost nothing. Many of them are doing nothing, just they are attending as duty. Even we are doubt their qualification and their expertise level. I'm not telling about degree. I'm telling about wisdom, how much they can input wisdom for the region, for the people, the whole society, So we have to reconsider, and maybe you can ask ASEAN Secretary General. We should ask together.
Yes.
I think Malaysia should do, because Malaysia is the strongest democracy compared to other ASEAN members. So I rely on Malaysia, but it seems Malaysia now they are. Your Prime Minister Anwar is not willing to do any, I'm not sure. How do you?
No, you must remember the struggle of, you must just recall back what the struggle went through by our current Prime Minister now, Anwar Ibrahim. He been sacked as a deputy minister, then he have to fight against his mentor, and he had a lot of obstacles to become a prime minister. And he is, for me, in my view, I will say that he's still new in that position. So you have to do a lot of realignment, because his government consists of various party, right? It's a coalition government. It's not like a single party control the entire government, all right? So there are a lot of things going on. So the problem is, and that's the reason he's very cautious taking the steps in terms of the foreign policy. So you need to be very cautious. You cannot go and upset many things, in rush. So that's the reason, even though I totally believe he tried to balance it, he tried to have a very clear kind of foreign policy. And that's the reason I mentioned to you just now. He just get the power. In 1 year, he tried to establish himself as a prime minister for all. And now he's moving, from that position, he's coming out in visiting various countries now, like he went and visited Australia recently, Germany recently. He tried to move, he tried to spread the message. And I believe he can be instrumental to make ASEAN as a stronger regional organization to counter the threats from the outside, from this region. I think he can do that, right? Because the Jokowi, the another strongest man from Indonesia, is going to be stepped down as a president. There will be a new president for Indonesia, right? And when you look back on Philippines and Singapore, also the prime minister going to step down. The new prime minister going to come, very soon, and this is going to be the very young leaders compared to Anwar, right? Who used to be a deputy prime minister and now he's become a prime minister. He have more experience to deal with this kind of issues in terms of the relation with the countries outside ASEAN. I think he can lead ASEAN better, in terms of the direction. All right. I strongly believe on that part. But you just have to wait.
How many
you got
years?
Another 3 more years to go.
Anwar, how many years?
3 more years to go.
I see. So
no, he's just completed 1 year. I think going to be 1 year plus now, because in 2022 he took power, right? Become a prime minister. Now he is in March 2024. It's more than 1 year. So he got another 3 more years to go, right? More than 3 years to go. I think he's going to shape up the ASEAN, because he also get very much involved with the recently concluded the ASEAN meeting and everything. So we can see that he can play a very important role.
His predecessor has only 1 year or 2 years, something like that. So I'm not sure why.
They have some political turmoil in Malaysia, I would say that. And now it's been after the election in 2022. So the current government able to form a coalition, right? Now is more stable, right? And so now we can see a very clear direction in terms of the foreign policy, so we can see that very clear direction. But it will take some time, because you need to have the current prime minister need to settle few issues, and he's doing it step by step. And the next major thing that he's going to do is, so probably he will come up with a clear foreign policy, like what we used to have in a previous administration.
So you mean similar to Mahathir?
Yeah, similar to Mahathir, and even Tun Hussein during the Tun Razak as well. And we have a very clear foreign policy.
What about
but
Najib?
Unfortunately,
Najib government.
Najib, even though I can see something on the foreign policy, but it's not so clear. In my view, it's not so clear. His foreign policy is not so clear.
He was corrupted with $1 million.
That is the issue. So he have some underlying issues that they have to deal with it, right?
It's solved or not yet solved?
No, he's already been convicted and is serving the sentence now, right? And quite recently been pardoned, partially been pardoned by the outgoing king as well. So that issue being settled, but he have some other cases as well that it is still in the court. So that is separate issues altogether.
Right, right. So you said you also doing terrorism. Do you mean you are doing
terrorism,
terrorism within domestic Malaysia or international terrorism? What kind
international as
of
well.
case
Both
you are
Malaysia and
doing?
international as well.
So example, it's a kind of with kind of religious issue background or drug issue or violence or insurgents or what mainly you are doing?
See, mainly I look into from the religious, right, based terrorist group, right. That will be my primary investigation. And I also look into the state-sponsored terrorism, right. That is another, the key area as well. So these are the main two I will look into it. And I'm not only focusing on Malaysia or ASEAN, also globally I look into the issues, right? And my great interest now is with Africa, what's going on in Africa now, where I believe now the epicenter of terrorism been shifted from Middle East to Africa now, right?
See. So in Malaysia, what issue of terrorism you are facing now?
No, in Malaysia, what happened is we only have like one particular incident which happened in 2016, Movida attack, right? Launched by inspired by the terrorists, right? From ISIS, right? Right. So they launched an attack. They tried to launch an attack in Movida, but it's been foiled. And because our intelligence agency, they have a very good network of intelligence, they're able to stop many intended unwanted incidents, right? So they are quite effective. Our intelligence are quite effective on that part, right? And they are working very closely with the other intelligence agency, particularly from West, and then they get a lot of feedbacks, and and from ASEAN country also they have a very strong kind of a network, intelligence network, where the intelligence been shared by the member states, right? And that is quite effective, right?
So you mean the Malaysian terrorists, they are linked to the Middle East or African terrorist group?
No, they have been inspired, because when you look back on the Malaysian terrorism or history of it, little bit, they've been inspired by what happened in Iran, for example. That is the revolution of Iran, and after that, what happened in Afghanistan? The Mujahideen. The conflict between the Mujahideen and Soviet Union in Afghanistan, that actually inspired. And even though Malaysia considered as a very peaceful country, right? And these people who subscribe the false ideology, religious ideology, right, very much believe that there is a need for them to fight to defend the religion in outside the Malaysia. So that's the reason they quietly quite actively involved themselves in Afghanistan and later part in Syria and Iraq. And they also play a very important role in bombing in Indonesia as well. So we can see that, because they've, it's all because of the false ideology, religious ideology. Because religion, when misinterpreted by the wicked religious scholars, that actually can turn a person, right, from good to evil, right?
Right.
So that's what's happening in Malaysia.
So what is the terrorist group name in Indonesia or in Malaysia?
In Indonesia, we have like we had like a Jemaah Islamiyah that is covered that entire ASEAN, right? And like for example, in southern Philippines, in Malaysia, right? In Indonesia, right? Singapore, for example, right? Even they have the links in southern Thailand as well, right? So even though these the leaders of the Jemaah Islamiyah, right, already been captured, right, and some of them died, but the ideology still exists.
Ideology, they still exist. What maybe still they have network and they still have local terrorists. You say Jamia Islamia, they still have ideology in
No,
Indonesia.
even though they already been suppressed, Jemaah Islamiyah, the organization been suppressed because of the the killing of the leaders or the detention of the leaders, right? Some of them been detained, right? The ideology is still there, right?
Maybe
So
they still have network and local groups.
exactly, we are talking about the sleeper cells in everything, right? Still there, still alive. The ideology is still alive. To stop these ideologies is very difficult, and you need to have a very strong narrative, religious narrative to counter this ideology. But unfortunately, we can see that there is, publicly people are not talking about it, because of the various reasons, and this been this only unique for Malaysia. It's also we having a problem in Singapore and in Indonesia, for example, right? Or in the Western country as well, in the US, the narrative is still there, right? The ideology is still there, right? So, for example, the ISIS, the leaders are all been killed, the caliphate been dismantled, everything, but still happening. After the ISIS been defeated, the bombing and the killing of people still happen in Europe. We can see that even in US. So they went and subscribed this ideology, right? So they must have the religious authority throughout the world, or they need to come up with a strong narrative to counter this ideology, Until now, I think until they don't achieve that part, fully, I think that is a problem.
So did you also study terrorism in Bangladesh or India? Do you know? I heard I'm not study detail about terrorism in Bangladesh. Maybe some of Pakistan-based terrorists came to Bangladesh, also linked to Rohingya in Burmese Bangladesh border. And I did not deeply study. So you are expert on terrorism. So do you have any idea?
No, when you want to talk about the exporting the terrorism, it's all done through the madrasas who been labeled as a legitimate religious schools, right? But unfortunately, these madrasas, right? I'm not talking about all madrasas. Certain madrasas in Pakistan already been infiltrated by the terrorists or terrorist support organization by funding them, and they use this school to brainwash the students who come from the various part of the world, right, to launch attack in their respective country once they already finish their studies in that madrasa, right? And they've been given a weapons training, right? Ideological platform been given to them, and they've been molded, right? And they've been brainwashed in certain level and been sent back to their respective country to launch the attack. And that's the reason we have a problem in India, in Bangladesh, right? Even in Sri Lanka as well, right? These are the people who inspired by this ideology, right? And launched their attacks. And now when you look back on the current trend of the terrorist attack, it's all been self-funded. It's no longer the funding is coming from Middle East or come from Pakistan, for example. It's not like that. It's come from it's self-funding, right? And it's quite unique when you look back on the London bomb attack in 2005. You know, the main perpetrator, right, took a bank loan, personal bank loan, to fund the entire attack, right? So you can see that how the ideology evolved to give the justification for the intended terrorist, right, to justify their action by self-funding the entire operation. Now, this is quite amazing, right? It's no longer like last time, like September 11, funding is come from one source, training, and they've been looked after, and they've been managed, and in a big group, and they went to US and the launch attack. It's no longer like that, right? You watch the video, right? You inspired, you get a loan, or you self-funded yourself to launch the attack. And that is a very, very dangerous kind of a situation now.
So it means
these are new things.
Local grown terrorists, they become their own locally terrorist group. So yeah, as you said, most religious background, Muslim, significantly people see it's become like, just religion, but once religion become extremist, and extremists become terrorists, violence, the ideology become extremist. If they become extremist, they don't want other people whoever they don't agree with them. Next step is physically violent. So it's step by step from simple religion to extreme to terrorist, right? But Muslim are many significant we see around the world. Also in similar other religion, Buddhist or Christian can be also terrorists, White supremacy in America also considered by police, they are terrorists, white supremacy. And also in Burma, Buddhist, Burmese last
Let
time,
me tell you
the terrorists, the monks, they are become extremists, and then they against other religion, and later they become violence. That become terrorists. Like that, any religion can be terrorist, but the Muslim are more significant. People can see widely.
See, when I look back on the how the terrorists evolved, so first of all, they start as a sympathizer to the cause, then they become the supporter, then they become a fundamentalist or extremist, then they become a terrorist. So these are the evolution, right? See, when you look back on the terrorism, terrorism is not exclusive for one religion. You need to take note on this, right? When you look back on the terms terrorism is come from derived from the French word, right? So terrorism is an act committed by the distorted people who don't fully understand the real intention of the religion, right? So they misinterpret the text, the religious text,
right,
to accomplish their intention, right? Their political motives, right? They misinterpret it for their own benefit by using the religion. So to blame the religion, personally, I feel it's not so right. As what you have said, I agree. Terrorism is not exclusive for Muslims, exclusive for Islam. No, there are terrorists in the Buddhists, not only in Burma. We can see that in Sri Lanka as well. In Sri Lanka conflict, the Buddhist monk actively involved, giving direction to the leaders what they're supposed to do, right?
right.
So, and they justify the act, right? So you will be surprised, and the Christians, when you talk about the white supremacists, right, or far right, right, groups in Europe, for example, right, and they are closely related to the Christians, right? So it is, through my research, what I find out, to blame a particular religion, right? And because the majority of the terrorists come from a particular religion and blame them, it is uncalled for. See,
Right.
you have to took it. I mean, there in one society or in one particular religion, there are some bad apples are there. So you need to identify them individually rather than putting the mark of the entire religion, which I think what the international, the news agency are doing, right? So when the Christian commit a terrorist act, he been known as a white supremacist, right, or extremist. They don't call him as a terrorist. They have a different label. Whereas when a Muslim committed a terrorist act, and he's known as an Islamic terrorist, which I think is biased. You cannot, why not you have a, a very common name for anyone who committed an act of terrorism, name that person or call the person as a terrorist.
Right.
Right.
So apart from religion, is there other type of terrorism? Example, like how do you see communism or totalitarianism or dictatorship? I mean, there can be state terrorism, also non-state terrorism among non-religious group.
State-sponsored terrorism, right? And they need to put it very clear stand on it. Not only they are focusing on the countries which is sponsoring the terrorism, who come from a particular religion, right? They have to look into across the board. As what you have mentioned it, when a state committed any kind of atrocity against his own citizen in the name of the religion, in the name of belief, right? That is need to be categorized as a terrorist act. But who have to condemn this, right? The world, especially the United Nations, have to play the role to condemn this kind of act. But unfortunately, right, United Nations is not actively playing this kind of a role. You understand now, right?
Right.
When
Right.
one country is doing a particular act, they name that country as committing a terrorist act. But when another country committing that kind of act, you have a different approach. Why you have a double standard?
Right. So I mean, United Nations and many INGO become useless when they compete with powerful, when they working with powerful countries, because they become useless because geopolitically, the power is priority than whether you are legitimate or not legitimate in the international political game. So now many are more visible and significant under powerful country. Many agency, UN agency become useless. That is very shameful. UN should find alternative way, but some of UN leadership are very shameful. They are just show they are useless, significant. Even they did not find alternative way or other solution. They are very much useless when we competing with power. And how do you see about terrorism in South Asia?
Right, you must remember, you know, terrorism being used as a tool to undermine developing nations by certain countries, right? Globally, you can see that, you know, this is very much in evidence, right? We can see the invasion of what do you call it, Iraq, for example. What is the purpose of it? It is unknown, right? Or probably is known, but is unknown, right? And the conflict in Middle East, why the Palestinian conflict cannot be resolved. It is a big puzzle for me. You know, all the issues can be resolved. Why they cannot resolve the Palestinian issue? Who putting the stumbling, who are the stumbling factors not to resolve the Palestinian issue? And the Palestinian issue being used by the terrorist group to justify their act. When you look back on all the religious-based terrorist group, they use the Palestinian suffering, the killing of the Palestinian, being used as a reason for their atrocity, their justification, right? So why the United Nations cannot find a solution to resolve the conflict which is happening between Palestinian and Israel? It's a prolonged conflict. Why they don't want to resolve it?
How long, right?
And the person, the person who are instrumental to come up with the two-state solution, Isaac Rabin, being assassinated by a citizen of Israel, right? So the Oslo Accord, right, cannot be implemented. Why the world powers, okay, restart this, or take the full initiative, right, to relook into the Oslo Accord to resolve this issue, right? And when you want to talk about the South, Asia, South Asia, when you look back on it, we have Afghanistan, we have Pakistan. These are two countries having a serious problem. Then we have Nepal, right? Bhutan, right? Then Bangladesh is another problem as well. Then we have like Maldives, right? Then Sri Lanka as well, right? So when you look back all these countries, right? These countries are surrounding India, right? And the terrorist activities in India, right? Last time is come from the neighboring countries, right? I know which I'm talking about, right?
Right.
And now what happened is, what they are doing is, now they come with the homegrown terrorists to create problem for India, right? And India is becoming a emerging economic power, right? So sometimes this kind of issues being created, right, on the economic process. When you look back on the terrorist attack in India, not only by religious belief, it can be some other motive, which some countries want to have a control on the affairs in India by creating problem, right? So these are the another important perspective that we have to look into it. And that's the reason the ASEAN is, we cannot allow. So what the China going to do? China going to be more aggressive. So now what we have here now is we have a room for discussion, right? So if we're going to allow the third party to come in, right, then you're going to create a lot of problem, right? So when you want to talk about the geopolitical and terrorism, is a correlated. It's quite unique, and sometimes the terrorism can be used to change the landscape of politics in one country.
Right. So Malaysia will be next ASEAN chairmanship, right? Next year.
Yes.
So maybe that
I think they
time,
will play a very important role. I can see that.
right?
So probably after Malaysia become the chairman of ASEAN, probably we can have another round of discussion how the ASEAN.
And what about current Malaysian policy on refugee? A lot of Burmese refugees are in Malaysia, and so how's Malaysia position? They are helping refugee. It's
No, we have like a very open policy, but of course, we have an open policy, but same time we have some measures have to taken to manage the refugees who are coming to Malaysia, right?
right.
And you need to understand, when you look back on the when you want to talk about the refugees, so vetting them will be a one problem, big problem, because some of them don't have a proper kind of a document. So you don't know where they come from, what their background, what they can do in this country, Like we don't have a similar problem with what being faced by Europe, right? Especially France, Belgium, and Germany, right? When they allow the refugees to come in freely, after after the ISIS been defeated or during the conflict, where these people who come as a refugees actually is a seasoned terrorist and went and launched the attacks in the respective country, right? So we don't want to have similar kind of a situation in Malaysia, and that's the reason Malaysia is taking a very cautionary steps, right, in terms of the vetting the refugees before we allowing them to resettle in Malaysia. But it is they are being tightly been monitored, they cannot do as they like. They've been tightly been monitored in everything, right? So these are the kind of experience that
right.
In terms of the refugee in Malaysia. Yeah.
So it is a main issue about the verification and screening case by case. It should be
Exactly.
It should be also the required expertise. Like think tank group and others. Many expertise should be. They can make involvement and consultation that can be, classify which what category and what we can check all the background of the refugee. So that will be helpful for the authority. So they need, think tank too, for screening and verifying refugee. So think tank should play a big role, but most authority did not request or not invited think tank. That is a negative thing, I guess.
Not only that, they have to include the intelligence officers as well. When they want to vet through the applications for refugees, and this, as you say, these officers have to work closely with the think tank to provide some kind of a platform for the authorities to make proper kind of a justification, a proper kind of a decision before the refugees been allowed to resettle in Malaysia. Yeah.
Right. Because without think tank input or consultation, they have a lot of mistake. Some are, vulnerable refugee. Sometimes they included in the deportation or something that is very dangerous, risky for the refugee, I mean, they can not distinguish which are very serious and not serious. So they mistakenly deported many qualified, very serious refugee too. So I don't know right now, Malaysia, I mean, this government should do better, I wish, but I don't know. They are also probably reluctant. As you said, they are still planning or preparing for a better policy. We, we have to hope they do better things.
No, I strongly believe that the current Prime Minister have the vision, right? And his desire to make Malaysia as a better country, and his vision is very clear.
Right.
And we just have time. We cannot rush things up. When you want to deal with the international relation, we cannot rush things up. We have to look into the various factor, right? Of course, the proper input need to be given to the Prime Minister to come up with a right kind of a decision.
Right.
And one of the way to give the rightful input will be come from the independent think tank who can give by the suggestion or recommendation or measures uh, for the to come to the country.
Sure, it's correct. And I also want Malaysia government support more democracy movement in Burma, and they should help democratization in Burma. And ASEAN should, put strong voice and strong policy to punish military government too. But ASEAN still peers, and they are loosely, make policy against military government in Burma. Actually, military government is also terrorist, state terrorists.
See, when you want to talk about the religion organization, any religion organization, when you want to come up with any policies, it must be done through the consensus of the respective country, right? Some country can agree, some country or disagree. That is the reason I say, why not we have like a collective kind of a voice, one voice, right? To
Right.
have one voice, you need to have like a proper kind of a structure. As the ASEAN Parliament is one of the way to have a one voice, that will eliminate the what do you call it, unwarranted voices who are not agreed on issues. So when you have a collective voice, it is one voice representing the entire the organization, and that is much more easier to deal with the one of the member state of country, like what you have said in terms of the Burma issues. When you have a collective voice to country to behave in a certain ways, and that is much giving an impact, great impact, rather than in one country. Like for example, in Myanmar, okay, Malaysia have one stand, and Indonesia have a stand, and Vietnam have another stand, Laos and another stand, and for Burma, they say, you are not one voice. Why should I follow you?
Right. So
understand now? So it is very much come to the structure of the ASEAN, right? So ASEAN have to have to rethink, and have to relook in the of the ASEAN for the betterment of the member states.
Right. I mean, Parliament is one tool, it's also important. And so also, before Parliament or before government representative, first thing I always suggest think tank group. They should open for think tank, So first we should find the best idea and strategy and policy from think tank, because the parliament or government representative, they will not input. I mean, they are very restricted. So very free and flow idea will come from think tank. For first, the ASEAN should invite think tank group first. Not necessarily track
I
one.
totally agree with you, John.
With track two, we can see who are actively think tank group. We can find, on the internet, on the website, on the, media. We should see think tank, active think tank, We should not invite unactive
Really?
think tank, very active and people, why many people know and many good idea. We can see now also we can find there are not that many, active one. So we can collect them and even, anybody they can open. So the idea will be come out from there, who has idea, only they can input. Even though you are good organization, if you don't have idea, you cannot input, So first, it should be open for think tank, and then government representative, and then you said parliament, if possible, like that, they should make implementation. So we should ask ASEAN, should do such kind of platform to allow ASEAN better strategy, better policy to open for think tank. First step,
Yeah, I agree with that. And one more thing, as to add on what you have said, see all the representative, right, government representative, they should engage themselves with the independent think tank, right, to allow them to give the feedbacks, right, whatever the recommendation, right, this thing assist them to come up with a decision, or they can bring the matter to the higher level, right? This should be the process. When
right?
The West, one of the reasons why they are so successful, whether it's a political party or whether it's a a cabinet minister, or we are talking about the individual member of parliament, and most of them seek from the independent think tank to get their feedback before they bring the issues to the parliament or bring the issues to the media. So they closely work with the independent think tank, right, to get the input. But unfortunately, that is not the practice in ASEAN member states, right? So, as what I mentioned to you earlier, most of the think tank being funded by the government, and they have a similar voice with the aspiration of the government, and they very rarely they contradict themselves with the government policies, or giving something out of the box for the government to think about it, and they rarely do that. It's a very rare case, right? But whereas in a Western country, this been allowed by the state, this been allowed by the cabinet itself, to give like outrageous kind of a opinion for them to evaluate the situation. Therefore, they can come up with a right decision for the benefit of the people and for the benefit of the country. This process need to be started in ASEAN countries generally.
Definitely.
Yeah.
We need to do ground changing, ASEAN should be ground changing.
Yeah.
The structure, the pattern. We cannot do like as usual, like tea, a cup of coffee or tea meeting. Not this kind of usual thing. We should not do anymore.
Yes.
We have to change, ground changing, and approach new idea, new strategy, and open all these ASEAN people, ASEAN member. Only then we can compete with other region, other countries. Otherwise, ASEAN will be always in, now even there are South China issue example. We are in big trouble. Even there are many countries involved, but China is beating one by one, that ASEAN members are suffering. If they are together, China cannot beat like that. But now China is beating one by one. Today, another one, tomorrow, this one, like that, So that's, we have to understand ASEAN member. Vanir, thank you very much for today. We have a good discussion.
And thanks for your kind invitation to invite me for this discussion. I had a great time. Thanks, John.